The hardest people to date aren't emotionally immature. They're the ones who look emotionally mature. Because when someone appears emotionally healthy to you, especially in the beginning, it's so incredibly easy to mistake potential for capability. By the time you actually realize that they can't build the kind of relationship that you've been hoping for, your heart is actually already invested. You've shared your dreams. You've introduced them to your family, to your friends. You've imagined a future together. And now you're left wondering whether you expected way too much. When the painful truth is, you may have simply expected emotional maturity from someone who didn't have it to give. Have you ever started dating someone and maybe you thought in the beginning, this feels different, this feels special, and they seemed thoughtful. They talked openly about their feelings. They were very forthcoming. They apologized when they made a mistake. They were accountable. Maybe they even had been to therapy and you thought, wow, this person is self-aware. You find yourself thinking, finally, this is somebody who gets it. Then life happened. Some sort of stress happened. The first disagreement, the first conflict, the first disappointment, and the first unmet expectation. So maybe you expressed that something hurt your feelings and you were really bothered by it. Maybe you asked for more reassurance. Perhaps you simply had a different opinion than they did. And then suddenly, the person who seems so absolutely emotionally aware really became defensive. And they shut down. They blamed you. They told you that you are the problem, that you are too sensitive. They turned the conversation right back onto you. Or maybe they just simply disappeared. They disappeared emotionally. And you found yourself thinking, where did the person that I met go? The truth is, they didn't become a different person. You simply met a different part of them. And one of the biggest misconceptions about dating is that emotional maturity is revealed when everything is going well. But it isn't. It actually never is. Almost anybody can appear patient and attentive, affectionate, and emotionally available when the relationship is new. We're all putting our best foot forward, and there are very few demands being placed on them. Emotional maturity isn't revealed during those easy moments. It's only revealed during the uncomfortable ones, during the difficult ones. It's revealed when you're disappointed. It's revealed when they're stressed, when they're embarrassed, when they have some sort of sense of discomfort, or really when they're told no, when they accidentally hurt someone they love. Because that's where emotional maturity either shows up or it doesn't. And the beautiful thing is, once you know what to look for, now you can stop choosing people based only on chemistry or attraction or your attachment wounds or potential. You begin choosing people based on something much more important: their actual capacity to build a healthy relationship with you. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. If you've never been here before and we haven't met, I'm Jenn Pinkerton. I'm a psychotherapist and a relationship and connection expert, and I help individuals and couples build healthier, more connected relationships where they can truly thrive. And today I'm going to walk you through 5 signs that someone is emotionally mature enough to actually build a healthy relationship with you. And just as importantly, the signs that they aren't. One of the fastest ways to recognize emotional maturity has nothing to do with how someone treats you in the beginning, when they're happy. Watch what happens when they make a mistake. Do they become defensive? I've often told my own children that when you see somebody behave when they're angry, that's the truth. That's who they are. So does this person point out something you did wrong? Do they minimize your feelings because they're uncomfortable? Do they lash out? Do they attack? Are they not comfortable sitting with the impact of their behavior? Or can they pause long enough to hear your experience without making the conversation about protecting themselves? This is one of the biggest differences between emotional intelligence and emotional maturity. And there is a difference there. Someone can know all the right therapy words. They can listen to podcasts. They can read books. They can talk about boundaries. They can talk about attachment wounds. They can talk about their attachment styles. They can tell you that they've done the work. But when they're confronted with the possibility that they've actually hurt someone they love, all of that knowledge means very little if they cannot tolerate discomfort or accountability, and if they're not regulated. Emotionally mature people understand something incredibly important. Your intention matters, but your impact matters too. And one of the healthiest responses that you're ever going to hear in a relationship or a relational dynamic is something like, that wasn't my intention, but I can absolutely understand why it felt that way, why it hurt you. See, notice what didn't happen there. There's no arguing. There was no defending, denying, explaining, and proving. There was no trying to convince you that your feelings are wrong. There's simply a pause with curiosity and accountability. And I often tell couples that accountability is one of the greatest gifts that you can give a relationship, that you can give to your person, because accountability creates safety. And you all know I talk about safety nonstop, because when someone can own their behavior without making you fight to be understood, then your nervous system begins learning something crucial, something incredibly important. And that is, I don't have to protect myself here. We have connection instead of protection. On the other hand, emotionally immature people will often experience accountability as criticism. Instead of hearing you hurt me, they hear you're a bad person. And because shame feels so overwhelming, they instinctively protect themselves. And that's when you see what I call the DDDEP. They defend, they deny, they deflect, they explain, and they prove. And the entire conversation shifts away from your hurt, which is what it was really about, and instead towards protecting their ego. And this is natural. We're human, but we can learn to be different. Because over time, that pattern is going to be exhausting. One partner is going to eventually stop bringing things up altogether because it just doesn't feel safe. Not because they stopped hurting. They just stopped believing that it was even ever going to be okay to be honest. So here's what I want you to remember. Emotionally mature people don't need to be perfect. They simply need to be willing to repair. Because taking responsibility doesn't weaken a relationship. It actually strengthens it. It tells the person that you love, our relationship matters to me. In fact, it matters more to me than my pride. And that is one of the clearest signs that someone has the emotional maturity to build a healthy relationship with you. So before we move on to the next sign and the next step here, I want to ask you something. If you're dating someone right now, or you're already in a relationship, do you actually know how emotionally healthy your relationship is? Do you actually know how healthy you are? Most people don't. They know whether they're happy. They know whether they're frustrated. They know whether they're fighting all the time, or whether maybe fighting more than they're intimate, but they don't actually know why this is happening. And that's exactly why I created the Pinkerton Relational Health Index, or the PRHI. So think of it as this owner's manual, maybe, for you, for your relationship. It's going to measure the areas that actually determine whether a relationship is healthy. Things like emotional safety, communication, friendship, trust, conflict repair, intimacy, and connection. And this is really about you, but it tells you how you're showing up. And if your partner did it too, it's going to tell them how they're showing up. This quiz is completely free, and I'll put the link in the description below. So whether you're dating, engaged, married, or just trying to heal after betrayal, it'll give you a really clear picture of where you stand and whether you're thriving or where you might need some intentional and focused attention and work. So now let's look at the second sign of emotional maturity. So one of the things that I pay attention to almost immediately when I'm getting to know someone, a couple or an individual, when I'm helping a client, and I'm trying to evaluate their relationship, I look for this. Can this person stay curious enough when they're uncomfortable? Can they pause? Because curiosity is one of the clearest signs of emotional maturity. Think about what happens when someone comes and talks to you, or they say, "You hurt my feelings." An emotionally immature person often hears criticism. Their brain immediately shifts to protection mode. They start gathering all the evidence to say, that's not possible. That's not what happened. That's not what I did. You're wrong. You're remembering it wrong. You're too sensitive. I didn't mean it like that. The goal becomes protecting themselves from a perceived attack. But an emotionally mature person has a very different response. Their first instinct isn't to defend themselves. They are not defending, denying, deflecting, explaining, and proving. They're trying to understand you. They become curious. Wow, I didn't know that. Can you help me understand what that felt like? Tell me more. I don't want to assume I even know what you experienced. I'm sorry. Do you hear the difference? One person is trying with the conversation. They want to understand, The other person is just wanting to win. And if you're trying to win, then everybody's losing. Because here's something I wish more people understood. Curiosity is not weakness. Curiosity doesn't mean you're admitting you're wrong. Nothing in that example of conversation admitted I was wrong there. Curiosity doesn't mean you agree with everything or even anything that your partner says. Curiosity simply communicates your experience matters enough for me to slow down, pause to understand it before I'm going to respond to it. And that one shift changes everything. One of the reasons emotionally mature people stay curious is because they understand something that emotionally immature people just don't. There is always a story underneath the behavior. It's the story in our head, and we all have them. They're based on our attachment wounds. When your partner suddenly gets quiet, there's a story. When they become irritable, there's a story. When they seem distant, there's a story. When they become emotional, there is a story. And emotionally immature people react to the behavior. Emotionally mature people become curious about the story. And that's why I teach couples to stop asking, what's wrong with you? And instead ask, what's happening inside of you? And those are completely different approaches, completely different conversations. This is also why I encourage couples to go to the feeling. You'll hear me say this all the time, go to the feeling instead of saying stuck in facts. Facts create debates. Feelings create connection. A relationship is about feelings. You can spend 30 minutes arguing about exactly what was said and get lost in the minutia of that. Or you can spend 5 minutes understanding why your partner felt rejected, unseen, embarrassed, lonely, or maybe unimportant. And guess which one is going to build intimacy? The couples who thrive don't become detectives trying to prove each other wrong. They actually become explorers trying to understand each other's inner world. Because when someone feels understood, their nervous system settles. Their walls of defensiveness come down. They no longer have to fight to be seen. The struggle is gone. So one of my favorite questions in therapy is simply, help me understand. I say that all day long. Help me understand. And those 3 words have saved more relationships than almost anything else I teach. Because emotional maturity isn't demonstrated by always having the right answers. You can't, you won't, you don't, I don't. It's demonstrated by having the humility to ask better questions, to be curious, to be compassionate. And people who consistently choose curiosity over certainty create relationships where both people continue feeling emotionally safe, emotionally known, and emotionally connected. And that's the kind of relationship that people don't just survive. It's the kind of relationship where they thrive. And that's what I want for every one of you. One of the clearest signs of emotional maturity has nothing to do with whether someone gets upset. We all get upset. We all have feelings. Emotionally mature people absolutely get upset. They get hurt, they get disappointed, they get frustrated, and they get overwhelmed. But the difference is that they don't expect everyone around them in their orbit to manage those emotions for them. And one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about relationships is that emotional maturity means you're just calm all the time. It doesn't. It means you know what to do when you're not. And you actually have this blueprint, this understanding of how to show up. Because we've all met someone whose emotions become everybody else's responsibility. When they're stressed, everyone's going to walk on eggshells. We're waiting to see how they're going to act when they walk in the door. When they're angry, the whole house feels it. When they're anxious, then everyone else is expected to calm them and fix it and adjust. And everyone is in some trauma response here trying to manage it. When they're disappointed, someone's got to handle it. And over time, you don't feel like their partner anymore. You feel like their emotional caretaker, and that is not your job. That's not emotional maturity. It's emotional dependence, and it's immature. An emotionally mature person understands that while you can support me, which of course you want your partner to support you, you cannot regulate me. That's my job. And one of the healthiest things you'll ever hear someone say is, I'm really overwhelmed right now. I need a little time to settle down. Can you give me a minute so that I can come back and have this conversation in a very healthy way? Do you hear how different that is from leave me alone? I'm done talking. I'm done with you. You always do this. This is your fault. You're too sensitive. One response created distance. The other one created safety. Emotionally mature people do not pretend they don't have emotions. They simply know that their emotions do not give them permission to become emotionally unsafe. That is a huge distinction. And most of the time, when people are emotionally mature, they haven't healed their attachment wounds. And that's for another day. Because every one of us has trauma or wounds. Every one of us has issues that we might not have healed or dealt with. And every single one of us has moments when our nervous system becomes activated. The question isn't, do you get triggered? Of course you get triggered. The question is, what do you do after you're triggered? Do you lash out? Do you immediately go into fight, flight, fawn, or freeze? Do you shut down? Do you criticize? Do you become sarcastic? Do you stonewall? Do you gaslight? Can you recognize what's happening inside yourself before it begins damaging your relationship? And this is not just romantic. This is parent-child. This is best friends. This is in any way. And I teach my clients something I call power in the pause. And the pause is where emotional maturity lives. It's the space between what you feel and what you choose to do next. Because feelings are not the problem. Our reactions are the problem. The pause allows you to ask yourself, what is happening inside of me right now? I'm going to choose to respond and not react. What's underneath my anger? Is it about this moment? Or am I touching an older wound? And am I in my adaptive child instead of my mature adult? It's having enough self-awareness to recognize that your partner isn't always the source of what you're feeling. Sometimes they're simply the person that's standing right in front of you and standing closest to an old wound, and they poked at it. And that's why emotionally mature people don't just know their triggers. They take responsibility for healing them. They don't expect their partner to spend the rest of their life avoiding every topic, every tone of voice, every situation that might make them uncomfortable. That sounds like a miserable way to live. Instead, they understand that healing is an inside job. Support is shared. Healing is personal. That doesn't mean they heal alone. It means that they don't make their partner responsible for doing the work they need to do. They need to do themselves. And when you're dating someone, pay attention to what happens after they become emotionally activated. Do they become more self-aware? Do they pause and slow down? Do they want to connect? Or are they self-protective? Do they lash out? Can they calm themselves, or do they expect you to calm them down? Do they own their reactions, or do they blame everybody else around them? It's somebody else's fault. Because emotional maturity is not measured by whether someone has big feelings. We all have big feelings at times. It's measured by what they do with those feelings once they have them. And that is one of the strongest predictors of whether someone can build a healthy, lasting relationship and one with emotional safety. One of the greatest gifts that somebody can bring into a relationship is the ability to make another person feel understood. We all want to be seen and heard. It's a fundamental human condition. Not fixed, not corrected, not talked out of your feelings, just understood. And if you think about that, that's what almost every human being is looking for. We want someone to look at us and say, I can see why that hurt you. We want validation. I understand why that mattered to you. We want reassurance. That makes sense. Not because they agree with us. They probably don't. But because they care enough to understand our experience. We're not looking for a winner and loser. We're looking for connection. And a clear sign of emotional security is somebody who can validate your feelings without feeling like they're admitting they're bad or they're wrong. Emotionally immature people often hear validation as agreement. They think, well, if I validate your feelings, then I'm admitting that you're right and I'm wrong. So instead, they defend, they deny, they deflect, they explain, and they prove. They justify, they minimize, they dismiss, and they tell you why you should not feel the way you do. You have no right to feel that way. And before long, you're not talking about your feelings or your hurt anymore. You're instead talking about whether your hurt is valid. And everyone's feelings are valid. Emotionally mature people understand something different. They know that validation does not mean agreement. Validation simply means your experience makes sense to me. I care. Those are two completely different things. So imagine telling your partner, I felt really alone this weekend. An emotionally immature response sounds kind of like, how can you say that? I mean, I spent the entire weekend with you. We were doing stuff nonstop. Are you kidding me? What is wrong with you? And now the conversation becomes about you providing facts. We're defending, we're denying, we're explaining and proving. But an emotionally mature response sounds like, I don't want you to feel alone. Tell me more. Can you help me understand what that was like for you? I miss that. See, notice what happened? Nobody argued. Nobody came defensive. Nobody started keeping score. One person simply leaned in and the other person leaned in. And people were curious about the emotional experience of the other. And that is the space where connection lives. I tell couples that relationships are rarely damaged because people have feelings. They're damaged because people feel alone in those feelings with no emotional safety. And when your partner has to fight to convince you that their emotional experience matters, they're going to slowly stop bringing you in on their hurt and their heart. They start protecting it. And that's why I teach couples to go to the feeling instead of staying stuck in facts. Facts rarely create intimacy. Feelings do. And when someone says, you never listen to me, don't get stuck on whether never is technically true. It doesn't matter. Instead, ask yourself, what is the feeling underneath that sentence? How must they feel right now? Go to their feeling. Maybe they're feeling, I don't feel important, or I don't feel chosen, or I don't matter. And now you're having a real conversation. Emotionally mature people don't spend their energy trying to win. There's no debate to win here. They spend their energy trying to understand and understanding your heart and your hurt because they know something incredibly important. People feel closest to the person who makes them feel most understood. This is universal in any relationship. Not the smartest person, not the funniest person, not even the most romantic or passionate person. It's the person who consistently makes them feel emotionally known. And that's what emotional maturity looks like. It's creating a relationship where your partner never has to earn the right to have their feelings matter. And when both people can do that, then emotional safety grows, trust grows, connection grows. And that's the kind of relationship where people really long for. If you learned only one thing from today's video, it's this. Don't look for someone who's perfect. Don't look for someone who never gets triggered. Don't look for somebody who always says the right thing. I want you to look for someone who is willing to grow, because the healthiest relationships aren't made up of two perfect people. Perfection doesn't exist. They're made up of two people who are committed to becoming healthier together and healthier than they were yesterday. One of the things I pay a lot of attention to when I'm working with a client or working with a couple is what happens after we've actually had a difficult conversation. Do they leave and they think, well, I hope my partner changes. I hope they figure it out. Or do they leave wondering, what can I learn about myself from this? Those are two completely different ideas, mindsets. Emotionally immature people are often committed to being right and committed to pointing the finger at someone else. Emotionally mature people are committed to becoming better. They're committed to understanding. They're committed to serving. And that doesn't mean they don't have opinions. It doesn't mean they don't stand up for themselves. Of course you have boundaries. And when I say serving, I mean, how can I help this situation? And your identity is not threatened by learning something new. They can hear feedback without feeling like they're attacked. They can admit they were wrong without believing that they're a failure. They don't feel weak. They feel strong. And they can change their mind. And why is this? Because growth matters more than ego. And I think one of the greatest green flags in dating is hearing someone say, I hadn't thought about that. I had never looked at it that way before. Or thank you for telling me. Thanks for sharing that with me. I want to think about it. I might want to work on that. Or even I'm still learning. None of those are signs of weakness. They're signs of humility. And humility is one of the strongest indicators of emotional maturity. If you're emotionally mature, humility doesn't feel like a risk to you. So now on the opposite, be careful of someone who always believes they're the victim. They're always right. They're always misunderstood. They're always blaming someone else for every failed relationship every single time, every conflict and every disappointment. If every ex was crazy, if every boss was the problem, if every friend eventually betrayed them, at some point, you're going to have to ask yourself a very honest question here. Is this someone who reflects or someone who only redirects? Because emotionally mature people don't spend their lives looking for someone else to blame. They spend their lives becoming more self-aware, more curious. They ask, what part did I play in this? What can I learn from this? How can I love better? How can I communicate better? How can I become a safer partner? That's someone who's capable of building a healthy relationship. Because here's the truth. You're going to change over the next 10 years. Your partner is going to change over the next 10 years. And life is going to change. Your careers will be different. Your bodies are going to change. Your family unit will change. Your financial structure will change. Your priorities will change. The question isn't whether change is coming. That's inevitable. The question is whether you're both willing to keep growing together during that change instead of growing apart. And that's why I believe emotional maturity isn't a destination. It is a lifelong decision. A decision to remain teachable. A decision to remain humble. A decision to remain curious. A decision to have humility and to keep becoming the kind of person who creates emotional safety for the people they love. And when two people make that decision together and they choose that every day, that's how they want to show up, then that's where healthy relationships are built. If today's video made you realize that you've been choosing relationships based on chemistry or attachment wounds instead of emotional maturity, or maybe you're already in a relationship and you're hearing some of this and you realize, I want to build some of these qualities with my person, I want to invite you to work with me in my transformational relationship program. I created the Relationship Blueprint Intensive. And I did this because most of us were never given an owner's manual for relationships. And a lot of people don't want to spend years in therapy. We learned instead by watching our families, repeating old patterns, hoping love would just be enough. It's never enough. In 30-day transformational program with me, whether you're by yourself as an individual or a couple together, you're going to learn how to create emotional safety. You're going to learn how to stay connected during conflict, how to be curious, how to communicate without defensiveness, how to repair effectively after hurt, deepen intimacy, understand your attachment patterns, and build the kind of relationship that doesn't just survive, it thrives. So if you're ready to stop repeating all these old relationship patterns and all these old wounds and start building the healthy relationship that you've always wanted, then I'll put all the information in the description below. The person you're dating doesn't have to know everything. They just have to be curious. And they don't have to have a perfect childhood, because really none of us do. They don't have to have the effective communication perfectly. They don't have to get it right every time. They just simply have to care enough to keep growing, to keep learning, and to stay curious. Because emotional maturity is not revealed by how someone loves you when everything is easy. It's only revealed by who they choose to become when love asks something difficult of them, when they're sitting in discomfort. And that's the kind of person worth building a life with. Now, have you ever found yourself wondering, why doesn't my spouse hug me? Or maybe, why am I always the one reaching for a kiss? Why does it feel like they've stopped wanting this physical affection with me? So if you've ever experienced that kind of situation or that kind of rejection in your relationship, you know it doesn't just hurt your heart. It makes you question the relationship in general. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about what it really means when your spouse or your partner stops reaching for affection, and why the absence of hugs and kisses and affection almost never is just about physical touch. We're going to uncover something deeper here about what is happening underneath that distance and how emotional connection impacts physical affection, and what you can begin to do about it to rebuild closeness again. Because sometimes the absence of a hug isn't about the hug at all. It's actually about something deeper, about something more meaningful. So I'm going to see you in the next video.